we'll rock and roll.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Books to Create Your Future. I am Viv Adcock, your host, and today I am thrilled, really grateful, Marilyn, that you've joined us to have a conversation. So welcome aboard, Marilyn Bradford.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. I'm loving to reconnect with you in Australia and that whole area. That's awesome.
And are you in New Mexico? Am I correct?
I am in New Mexico. Yes, yeah. Santa Fe, New Mexico.
So this is one thing I love about Access Consciousness. I mean, the people that you meet and the contacts you've got and the networks you build, and it's this global, incredible connection with people that have a myriad of skills and capacities and their backgrounds and their life stories. So one of the reasons I asked you to come on live with me is you've got a phenomenal story. And I would just like to ask you, how did Right Recovery for you come to life? How did it find its way into the world through you?
Well, I'll give you a short history. But golly, how many years ago? I can't think. 1990, 88, I was diagnosed as an alcoholic. That was way back there. And a depressive. And I realized, even from this reality's perspective, that I'd had addictions all my life, my first one being sugar, like at 5. So I went through traditional treatment, did outpatient, went to traditional 12-step, was in it for over 17 years. And as I was getting into it, I was in therapy. And my therapist said to me, because I was leaving a marriage, blah, blah, blah. He said, I think you'd make a great therapist, Marilyn. I'm like, really? Okay. I don't know what I'm going to do, so I'll go to graduate school. So that's what I did. Got a master's in social work with a specialty in addiction, worked at a psych hospital, which was actually a great experience, started a private practice, worked for a psychiatrist, and all the while going, I know there's got to be something greater than what's out there. I just know it. And I would say to people, I don't know where else to send you but AA, but just take what you know works for you and don't feel you have to do things that seem wrong or that seem weird. And I tried all these other things, rational emotive therapy and women for recovery and all this and all this and all that. In the meantime, I had a friend who had been in Access, had started going to Access classes. This was way back when, and you could share tapes and do things like that. So she was giving me tapes of Gary's to listen to. At that point, Dane wasn't doing, he was doing his sessions, but he wasn't doing classes with Gary or on his own. That was before ESB, ESC, and SOP, the dark ages. Anyway, I said to my friend, I've got to go see Gary. Oh, I'll tell you, actually, there was something else. I knew his voice because I'd been listening to these tapes. And I was taking a walk, and I was listening to them when I was walking. And on my walk, I heard Gary's voice say, time to come to Access. I was like, what? What? He said, time to come to Access. I'm like, you don't even know me. I don't know you. And he's like, yes, you do. So I had lunch with my friend, and I said, I've got to go meet Gary. And she's like, you haven't even done Bars Foundation, which it I'm like, I know. She said, wait a minute. In 3 weeks, there's the first Access body class in California. I'm like, I'm going, I'm there. And that was the start of me in Access. And I began learning the tools, being in question, not answer, empowering people greater. I was pretty much an empower to begin with, but this was even, empowering people to know that they know, heavy and light, who does it belong to? Sometimes with sort of covert consciousness twist to it. But I realized that my clients were getting better faster. And that's when I approached Gary and said, hey, Gary, can we do something with Access and addiction? And he was like, absolutely. And at that point, there was one right class, Right Body for You. And I said, can we call it Right Recovery for You? And he was like, Yeah, I think I'll do a series of write classes. And that's how all of that came about.
Wow.
And then it just and then he kept encouraging me to write the book. You got to write the book, Marilyn. I'm like, okay, I'll write the book. And I did write the book and started doing classes. And it's just, I've never looked back. It was such a gift for me to have all that support from Access and all those tools. Because seriously, I mean, I'd been trained in some of the best psychotherapy techniques and Access tools, hands down.
Yeah.
People were getting better faster.
So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is obviously your personal journey for many, many, many years struggling with addiction, and then, you know, going to therapy, popping out the other side of therapy, having this new possibility of, well, yeah, maybe I could facilitate people to have a greater life and a greater set of choices beyond addiction.
Yes.
And Access came into your world, and then you went, wow, okay, these tools and what I already know, and there's so many people out there that struggle with addiction. What else is possible? So, yeah. So then that's what I'm hearing, which is, and I know your background, it was a phenomenal journey for you, Marilyn. I know you've just glossed over it, but for somebody to deal with addiction, you know, can you talk to more about that? Because you've worked literally with thousands of people with addictions. So yes. Can you give an insight for people that may not have much awareness of addiction, or that are struggling with addiction but don't know where to go with it?
Well, that's sort of a two-parter, at least, maybe more. But the first thing I want to do is to talk about what addiction actually is. Because working with Right Recovery and having been in this realities treatment and all of that, I realized that there's so many lies or myths and lies about addiction in this reality that just aren't true. And addiction is something entirely different. Addiction is actually an energy looking for a target.
Wow, say that again.
Addiction is an energy looking for a target. So we think of that target as being alcohol, drugs, maybe gambling, maybe sex, but it can also be things like trauma drama. You can be addicted to needing to be right. You can be addicted to health or being perfect, the Barbie addiction. You can be the body. You can be addicted to being an intellectual. So what is that? What is that energy? It's an energy where we actually, out of a sense of wrongness of ourselves, and we can get into that later, we kind of leave. We look for a behavior or a substance or even a person and make them greater than us. And whenever there's any kind of anxiety, that's where we go. We go to that behavior. It can be gardening, for heaven's sakes. It can be being the perfect mom, or the dad who does everything right for his son. It can be almost anything. It's really about the energy of it, and a topic we can get into, but let's see how this goes with you. Right, this part is the difference between use, abuse, and addiction. Viv?
Yes. Use, you've just stunned me. Use, abuse, and addiction. It's like, oh my God. How long have we got? So thank you, because that thing of addiction, most people automatically jump to the conclusion of, oh, well, you know, I'm not addicted to X, Y, or Z, so therefore I'm not an addict. But you have just opened up a whole new other universe. And this, for me, what I got was, underneath all of this is that addiction to wrongness. You know, is that the root? Because
yes.
Wrongness constantly keeps you in that state of judgment and keeps you in the conflict and keeps you in, I've got a problem, and you fight yourself and then you loathe yourself, and on it goes. So do you want to comment?
Yes, because after doing Right Recovery for about a year, that's when I realized these addictions, like to playing cards or to fixing other people's problems or doing good or whatever, those are all, alcohol and drugs too, those are secondary addiction.
Hmm.
The primary
Wow.
addiction is to judgment and the wrongness of self. And that starts very early on in our childhoods because we are so different.
And that's another point that I want to bring up, because there's a line at the very beginning of your book. I've actually got it written down to remind me. Addictions is a way of coping with not fitting in, with being different, you know, with feeling wrong and feeling overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
that, you know, if you want to talk to that as well, because that's another doorway in for people to recognize, hang on, is there a different possibility if I'm not wrong and I'm not effed up and I'm not, you know, a problem?
Yeah, absolutely. And that can happen deliberately. Some people have pretty mean parents.
As you know.
as I know, and you probably know too. It can also just be you don't fit into the culture. You know, as Smiths, we do this. We go to church or we go to synagogue or we go wherever we go. And men are like this, and women, no, come on, you're a girl. You need to grow up and be a woman, and here's the things you need to do. And here's how you need to be. And here's how you need to react. And this little kid, girl or boy's going, okay, this doesn't make any sense to me. I guess, essentially, being me is wrong. It's all about image and fitting in.
Ooh.
And wow. Yeah. And that creates an energy, a space. It's not even a space. It's more like a place of, I think I'd be better off if I just disappeared. And that's what addiction is all about. It could be a hockey addiction or a sports addiction, or I'm going to disappear into something that I can sort of make sense of.
Yeah, and I guess also that whole, because we're not born wrong, you know, as babies, toddlers, at a certain point, we have this beautiful, joyous wonderment of our world around us and this delight at being alive and having a body and engaging with people. And then the feedback, like you were saying, from parents or family members or peers or whoever it is, that feedback starts to give you this very distorted message about you or what you're being, or, you know, something that's creating that judgment. And I think as a little person, we do our utmost to please people and keep people happy and maintain, you know, some kind of joy, but we end up bending and folding and mutilating ourselves and our very essence, our very being, the thing that makes us the most divine, beautiful person that we are. We start to distort and compact and, you know, twist that into something as a way of trying to, you know, keep the onslaught at bay, which doesn't work either.
Well, it does, sort of. And the thing to remember is, as a child, you needed your family or your parents or someone to take care of you. You couldn't just go out on the street at 8 or 9 or 10. So you had to do that. And for most of us, it worked sort of. However, nobody ever said to us, okay, you're an adult now. Most of us were never taught the skills to do anything but try to fit in.
Yeah.
So, and many adults are still trying to do that, and they don't even know there's another possibility.
So would the addiction be like I'm going to use this word, like a soother, like a pacifier to somebody, that it gives them that temporary reprieve from the intensity? And that's the trap, you know. In one respect, they might take alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever and have some kind of space or relief, or things aren't as crazy. But then all the judgment of what's wrong and other people's opinions and whatever's projected at them then comes on top of that and twists them into it further. Is that?
Well, sort of. Also, it's never really space to be in an addictive behavior.
Okay.
It just isn't, because it's a lie. It's a lie that you can't be you. But the difficulty is also more that people don't have the tools. I was doing some private sessions over the holidays, and I was working with a man who was working on some food addiction. And I was talking about trusting yourself. And he said, in the program, the typical program, you're told you cannot trust yourself.
Wow.
You have to have this answer. You have to have this structure. you've already proven you can't trust yourself. So everything that is, let's let that go.
Yeah, exactly.
I put on shorts, boys, poets, and beyonds. And the difference between Right Recovery and all of this is my target, its target is, as with Access, empowering people to know that they know. And for me, empowering people to learn to trust themselves, which is something that they learned mostly as a child that they couldn't and shouldn't do. They should allow the experts to tell them how to be and how to behave and where to go and what to do and how to marry or all of this.
And get it right.
And get it right.
According to whose standards, you know, and that's a major part of that, Marilyn, that learning to trust yourself again, because I think once that's gone with somebody, or it's misplaced, or it's been forgotten about, it can be a very, I want to say the word treacherous is what's coming to my mind of, you know, how do you navigate life? How do you know what works for you? How do you know what brings you joy and happy and allows, you know, the capacities and the skills that you have to shine forth? If you don't trust yourself, you'll always hang on to something maybe smaller or lesser or more compacted than what you could actually have if you built that trust again. So do the tools, do the processes and whatever that are in Right Recovery for you, connect people to themselves again, and I'd build that trust.
Yes, excuse me, some strangers at my door and we have a big snowstorm, so I better go see what's going on.
A big snowstorm. So yeah, you know, how do you reconnect with that part of yourself? And I know when I was reading the book, the Right Recovery book, which, ladies and gentlemen, this is Marilyn's book. Yeah, I know when I was reading this, it's like when you've got something to hang on to, when you've got some tools, when you've got something that unravels the confusion or the conflict or the misinformation that you've been given, you can start to have a sense of peace. You can start to connect with who you are. You can start to build that, like you were saying, Marilyn, that level of trust in yourself again. So you were just going to talk about the tools, you know, in the Right Recovery book and in the process, you know, in the classes. Do those tools reconnect people and build that platform of trust with them again?
Yes. And some of them are sorry, I'm just readjusting here. Some of them are as sort of, I call global, as being in the question always. Learning to not come to conclusion. That's so important. People would come into my private practice and they'd go, so I go, what's going on? They go, well, I'm depressed. And I would go, how do you know? And they go, what? And I'm like, how do you know you're depressed? Or how do you know you're an alcoholic? Well, my doctor said, or I looked it up. I'm like, what if that's not accurate? What if there's something else possible? So you really want to get people to question everything.
And it's the question that kind of opens the space for them to be curious again and start navigating and researching or asking questions and knowing that something greater is possible. Something you mentioned earlier, you know, the earlier tools, and we say the earlier tools of access consciousness. So the ability to know what's light and heavy, the ability to have that sense, to know what's light is a truth for you and what's heavy is a lie. And it's often the heaviness that we find ourselves totally, you know, enmeshed in. And I get for a lot of addictions that the heaviness is what would be the most consuming energy rather than going towards what's light, which is what's true.
Well, and also I really work with people to practice being present. Most people have no idea what that is. And that's something that most of us aren't taught. We're taught to be in our head. We're taught to do the next right thing. It's almost like we work as automatons, kind of, oh, this is what I do now. This is what I do now. It's Sunday. I do the dishes. I'm supposed to get married next week, whatever it is. Rather than actually being that whole living in 10-second increments, just practicing it for off and on a few days. You cannot get past addiction if you're not present. Second thing. You cannot get past addiction if you're not connected with your body. And all of the programs in this reality essentially disregard the body. So.
And how ironic, the first class that you attended was a body class.
Body class, yes.
That's incredible.
It was an awesome class.
So, Marilyn, so now we've moved on to, right, you've created Right Recovery for you as a specialty, I guess. So can people attend classes with you? You've talked about you do sessions, but can people attend classes?
Oh yes,
How
absolutely. I mean, things have changed a lot since before the pandemic. I was traveling the world a lot. I didn't come to Australia with a class, but one of my last classes was in New Zealand. That was a great class, and I really like that, but that hasn't really picked up since the end of the pandemic in terms of traveling. I'm working on it. So I do a lot of online classes. And there's lots, once again, there's lots in the shop. And then I do private sessions and that sort of thing. And I do, Facebook Lives, and there's a lot on my website that is free. So people want to just check out the stuff. And because I've done a lot of interviews, I mean, things like this, but with, people all over the world. I loved what you said in the beginning. And we all have these different takes. Even if we've moved beyond our culture, we still know how that culture operates and, how people view addiction and view recovery and all those kinds of things. So I do want to do more traveling.
And I get that this is a massive, because I've spoken to other people that have come through Alcoholics Anonymous, or they've done the 12-step process, whether it's debt that they keep getting into, or gambling or alcohol or whatever. And they've all said the same thing. It's like there's nothing, once they've gotten through that process, there's nothing for them then. There isn't a framework or just something for them to hold on to until the wheels of their life really start to find that momentum again. So from my interesting point of view, I would say that Right Recovery for you is a major support system, if you like, a guide, a coach, your own way of knowing that, look, and addiction isn't a life sentence. And that's something I took from you. Addiction doesn't have to be a life sentence, and to be able to go beyond that. You hear people, I'm 12 years clean this week, or I think the commitment to yourself, the commitment to your life and your future, and the caring that's required for you to commit to that is immense. And sometimes having something or somebody there to actually help you through the bumpy times, because there will be bumpy times.
Yes, there will be bumpy times.
Is crucial for long-term, success, if you want to call it success, or actually getting your life going in the way that you've always known it could go.
Well, and also the other thing that I began realizing in the pandemic is there's so much what I believe is required information that people lack. So I started doing other kinds of calls, like I did one on narcissism. I teamed up with Access and did one on gaslighting and addiction, and one on abuse and addiction. I've done them on, clearing the addiction to fixing other people. The big five have really come in a lot. And we keep getting this energy and information. You should put yourself last or second and help everybody else. And that's one of the biggest addictions there is, buying into that.
Yeah. Exactly. So
there's a lot of, I believe, information that's required besides, after you're just getting past your addictive behavior. I did a call on recovering from family. It was a teleseries. It was so intense. I did that with Access too, actually. It was so intense. I'm like, this is the root of so much. So now I have a membership program, which is what's family got to do with it? And every month we do different things. I think this month is family and food. The point is, without having all this information about all the crazy stuff that's going on, it's difficult to move forward, I believe.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because we don't even know what we don't know. We don't know how much we've taken on, how much we're walking around with, how much we're still functioning from, and we think we're being us, And this is one thing I loved about Right Recovery. And I think you said to me years ago, it's about recovering the parts and pieces of you that you've lost or you don't even know exist. And so that for me that's a whole other story in itself. All of these parts and pieces of us that we've lost through divorce or through, abuse or anything.
Yeah.
So there's so much more available for people beyond, the traditional forms and realms of addiction. So thank you, Marilyn. It's been a phenomenal interview. So I just want to talk a little bit about your book too. So for anybody that's watching that, yes, you can go to Marilyn's website, marilynbradford.com. She's also got this book, Right Recovery for You, which is available on Amazon and it's also at the Access Consciousness shop. Right. You can also buy that. So we've just got the links up there. So AC Publishing and happinessisjustachoice.com as well. So any of those avenues you'll be able to purchase the book through. Anything else you want to add, Marilyn? Anything we haven't added to this amazing conversation today that you'd like to add?
Yes. I would like to give a tool that everybody goes, what? One of the things that I do when I work with someone who comes in and says, well, I have this addiction, I say, well, what's right about your addiction you're not getting? And that creates a whole conversation. Generally ends up, it's the best coping skill you had at the time. And what can we do and be and change? But just the idea that there could be something right about it, that it's not all wrong. They're not all wrong. They're not all bad. That changes a lot for people. So what's right about it you're not getting. Yeah.
And something that we touched on just briefly earlier was the twist. It's like when somebody asks you a question like that, when somebody brand new comes into your room and they sit down and they think they're all shapes effed up and wrong and, they're a problem child and whatever else. And you're like, whoop, you just take the head and turn the head in 180 degrees and get them to look at a different possibility, or at least invite them to look at a different possibility. And that's the purpose of the question. It's to get you to look from a different space. It's like you're putting on a different set of lenses to look at the situation and not just the same ones that are from judgment or wrongness.
Exactly. And this reality. Don't look through the eyes of this reality.
Yeah. Because you'll always think that you're wrong.
You'll always think that you're wrong and that somebody else knows better. And generally speaking, they don't.
And just because you're different doesn't mean you're wrong.
No. I always tell people, all the great people in history have been different. I mean, Picasso, Mahatma Gandhi, you name them.
Leonardo da Vinci.
They've all been people who were very different. And we're willing to actually be that different.
And embrace it. Imagine embracing and enjoying and actually allowing this part of your personality or this side to you that you've thought for so many lifetimes or years or days or however long has been so wrong is actually your greatest gift.
Yes. The uniqueness of you is not a wrongness. It's your greatest gift to the world.
So if you'd like to know more, marilynbradford.com. I also want to say a huge thank you to Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, who has been majorly institutional in my life in regards to turning my life around, and obviously Marilyn's and thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the world. So thank you, Gary Douglas. So accessconsciousness.com if you want to know more about this weird and wacky way of looking at the world that works.
Yes, it does.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. A phenomenal conversation. And who knows, what would it take to get you back to Australia one day?
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Thank you, Viv, so much. I really enjoyed your question.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And feel free to share this with anybody that you know may be struggling with addiction. And remember, it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Thanks, everybody.